See, Nat's worked on my graphics real good today.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where she comes up with those things, but sometimes they are pretty good. Alright, as you can tell, the title of the message is about the feast and the riddle. A man was working in the produce department, was asked by a lady if she could buy half a head of lettuce. He replied, "Half a head? Are you serious? God grows these in whole heads, and that's how we sell them." You mean she persisted that after all these years I've shopped here, you won't sell me a half a head of lettuce? "Look," he said, "if you like, I will ask the manager." She indicated that she would appreciate that, and so the young man marched to the front of the store. "You won't believe this, but there's a lame-brained idiot of a lady back there who wants to know if she can buy a half a head of lettuce." He noticed the manager gesturing and turned around to see the lady standing behind him and obviously having followed him to the front of the store. And he said, "And this nice lady was wondering if she could buy the other half."
Oh, no. Good save.
Later in the day, the manager cornered the young man and said, "Man, that was the finest example of thinking on your feet I have ever seen." "Where did you learn that?" He said, "I grew up in Grand Rapids, and if you know anything about Grand Rapids, you know that it's known for its great hockey team and its ugly women."
Oh, God.
Oh.
The manager's face turned flush, and he interrupted. He said, "My wife is from Grand Rapids." Then the young man said, "And which hockey team did she play for?"
Whoa.
Well,
He was fired.
another thinking on his feet there, man. Well, in our study of the life of Samson, we have seen this man who began with so much promise and potential fail to live up to his God-given potential. He was a man of great physical strength, yet was weak morally and spiritually. He could conquer others, but he couldn't conquer himself. Samson was a man dominated by his senses rather than logic, and we have seen that Samson's carnal proclivities have led him down the path of life, which is not a good one. We have learned that Samson cannot control his lustful appetite, and when he sees something that he likes, he's not satisfied until he gratifies his desires. He follows his sensual instincts that lead or find foreign women more intriguing than those of Israel. Not only does Samson have trouble controlling his lustful appetite, but he also has a tendency to go to places where he shouldn't be.
Right.
After Samson's birth, the first thing we read about is that Samson went down to the town of Timnah, and this was a town that was occupied by the Philistines, the enemy of the Israelite people. And this was a place where he had no business being in the first place, but so why is he there? I don't know. Maybe he's not satisfied or content with life, but you know, sometimes people do that. If they're not satisfied, they go looking for something to satisfy them in the wrong places, don't they? I mean, I think of people doing alcohol, drugs, and whatever, you know, to try to find satisfaction in this life. We also learned that after his initial trip to the town of Timnah, he later went down to Timnah with his parents and approached a vineyard there, also a place where he shouldn't have been in the first place. And as a Nazirite, Samson was not supposed to have anything to do with the grapevine. He was not supposed to drink wine or fermented drinks, and as a Nazirite, he was not supposed to have anything to do with the grapevine at all. And as we surmised, I think, I'm sure Samson probably ate some of the grapes while he was there. You know, Samson was not going to deny himself of satisfying maybe his cravings. And like so many of us today, Samson was placing himself right in a situation where he would be tempted to violate the commitment, or his commitment to the service of God. I mean, he was, again, placing himself in the wrong places. In other words, he was placing himself in a situation where, with the potential of compromising his Nazirite vow. Or to say it another way, Samson was placing himself in a situation where he could possibly sin. That's how we would put it today. Right?
Yep.
But as we have learned, Samson does not seem to care about his Nazirite vows or his commitment to the service of God. It seems that the only thing that Samson cares about is gratifying his own desires. Well, in our last lesson, we saw that Samson not only continued the downward spiral in his life, but he deliberately turned aside and went to the town of Timnah, and there he defiled himself by coming in contact with a dead lion that he had killed on a previous trip. And as we know, as a Nazirite, he was not to have anything to do with a dead corpse of any kind. But when Samson went to look at the lion he killed, he discovered that there was honey inside the carcass of the lion. Samson again couldn't resist taking and eating the honey from the carcass of the dead lion. And again, you get an idea that this guy is quite the character, don't you? When Samson did this, again, he violated his Nazirite vow. But on top of this, Samson not only ate the honey, but he also gave some to his parents. Man, he didn't care about himself, he didn't care about his parents, he didn't care about anybody that doesn't sing. I mean, I guess the only thing he cared about in himself was his gratification. And again, by doing what he did, Samson shows that he doesn't care about his own ritually unclean status before God. Yeah. But it also shows that he doesn't care, or he cares little about others, including his parents. I don't know, it's a kind of a sad commentary on the life of Samson. But again, I can't help but say, you know, there are people like that today, aren't there? Yeah. Well, in our lesson before us, we see an unchanged and unrepentant Samson. Once again, we will see that Samson continues the downward spiral toward destruction. In the scene before us, we see that Samson continues his life of sin. In fact, we see him actually treating his sin as if it was nothing more than a joke. Okay? There, get that guy moving there. In our text before us, we see that Samson not only cannot control his lustful desires, he also cannot control his tongue. Today we begin reading in Judges chapter 14, beginning in verse 10. It says, "Now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for bridegrooms. When he appeared, he was given 30 companions. 'Let me tell you a riddle,' said Samson to them. 'If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes.' 'Tell us the riddle,' they said. 'Let us hear it.' He replied, 'Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet.'" That's the riddle. Well, I don't know about you, but if I didn't know any more details than that, I don't think I could solve it either. Right? And I think that Samson knew he had a pretty good deal set up here on this. Huh? Yeah, I'm sure in his mind there's no way that I can lose this deal here. Right?
I'm wondering, could I try to answer the riddle well?
Well, you can, but I'm going to go through it. But
Yeah, we're going to go through it.
okay.
I think it's the lion in his carcass.
Well, it is.
That's what I thought too.
Absolutely it is. But you have the privilege of knowing what
Knowing ahead of
went before.
Right.
Okay? They didn't.
Okay, I get it.
See? They didn't know. Matter of fact, nobody knew about it. Except for Samson.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Well, the first thing I want to notice is that Samson's infatuation with sin. The focus of our text is centered on Samson's marriage to a Philistine woman. From the first time he saw her, he was consumed with having her as his wife. You know, we talked about that before. I mean, he was so infatuated with this woman, he had to have her. In these verses, we see that Samson continues his downward spiral in the life. Samson continues his disobedience to the plan and purpose of God that God had for his life. Samson does not care about what God's plan for his life is. He doesn't care. In the scene before us, we find that Samson has a feast and a wedding on his mind, and that's the only thing that's on his mind. Now, there are a couple of statements that Samson made that reveals how infatuated he was with the Philistine woman. In verse 3, Samson says to his parents, "Get her for me. She is right for me." I mean, I don't know about you, but that's pretty demanding. I wouldn't talk to my parents like that. I mean, I might have been knocked across the floor, room if I'd have talked to my parents like that. But he doesn't seem to care about what they think. In verse 7, we read that Samson liked her, or as the King James Version of the Bible puts it, she pleased Samson well. It is obvious how infatuated he was with her. It was more than love at first sight. It was lust at first sight. I mean, he doesn't even know the woman. He just sees her, right? Samson's infatuation with the Philistine woman reminds us of how we can become infatuated with sin ourselves. When I say infatuated with sin, I'm talking about getting to the place where we are consumed or controlled by our sinful nature. I mean, I think of the Apostle Paul, I do the things that I don't want to do, and I'm fighting this battle within myself. It is a constant struggle, and that's the way sin is. It's a pull, and it pulls us in the wrong direction, of course. And when this happens, there are always two things that play out in our lives. First of all, the will of God is overlooked. As we have seen, the law of God was clear concerning marrying outside the Hebrew faith. In Exodus chapter 34, we read, "Do not worship any other god, for the Lord whose name is jealous is a jealous God. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land, for when they prostitute themselves to their gods and sacrifice to them, they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. And when you choose some of their daughters as wives for your sons, and those daughters prostitute themselves to their gods, they will lead your sons to do the same." That's Exodus chapter 34, verses 14 through 16. God warned the people of Israel about marrying outside their race because he knew it would lead them to turning away from him and embracing the pagan gods of the heathen nations that they were marrying into. That's the way. It usually works that way. It doesn't work the other way. And God knows this. He knew that if they married into idolatrous people, they would become idolaters as well.